All right, good morning, everyone. We're going to get kicked off. We're going to have a quick discussion about Microsoft Secure Score this morning. My name is Stuart Clark. I'm a PM who owns the experience and the service. We're going to be giving you a quick overview of what the tool is, what it lets you achieve. More importantly, what has changed between now and last year. So last year we were RSA, where we introduced Secure Score. A year's gone past and there's been a lot of improvements in the service itself. We kind of want to highlight those to you and take you through demonstrations of what's changed within the product itself. So what is Secure Score, for those of you who don't know? It's a tool that will basically give you insights into your security position and then allow you to make changes and configurations that will help increase your security posture. So we give you a list of recommended security recommendations that you should be applying across your tenancy, and their Secure Score will guide you through allocating these actions. For each action or recommendation, we give you a series of points, and then ultimately these roll up into what we call your Secure Score, which is a total of all of these points that you can get for configuring your tenant. The tool itself offers real insights across the whole sphere. So I don't know if you remember from last year, we were talking about Office Secure Score. We've recently repositioned ourselves, whereas now we are Microsoft Secure Score, because we have taken more controls from the service aside from Office. So we now bring in things like Windows telemetry, EMS telemetry, we bring in some Azure telemetry. So we're slowly expanding the sphere of the controls that Secure Score makes recommendations to you for. And this is going to only increase over time as we add more and more recommendations from the service into the experience itself. We also then give you the option to kind of easily compare your score, how you're tracking over a day-to-day period, over a month-to-month period, or over a 3-month period. So you can plan out a security roadmap that's going to help you track your progress and kind of meet your security goals that are aligned to your business posture. We have the concept of a modeler, and we'll show you this when we kind of go through the demonstration. But what we do is we let you set a target score for your organization. And a target score is basically, what security posture would you like to achieve? So I can move a modeler to a certain level, and then the tool will recommend all of the actions that I need to take in my environment in order to meet that target score. Each control breaks you down some pertinent information, such as what is the user impact to actually implement this security recommendation? What is the implementation cost to implement this security recommendation? So you can then start to make informed business decisions around productivity versus security within your environment. So what's new? So as I mentioned, we were here last year and a lot has changed since then. So as you'll see, we now have Windows integration. So if you're a Windows ATP customer, we now bring that data in and we have pivoted the score to be a cumulative of your Office score plus your Windows score. So your Microsoft score is what this now becomes. So we take those two key components and we add them together to give you your Microsoft Secure Score. You still maintain scores for the individual stacks within the service, but we're now driving towards this concept of having an overall score for everything that you have within the Microsoft Cloud itself. We've added the ability to ignore and third-party certain controls. So we had a lot of customer feedback that they'll be following a security best practice, a recommendation, such as using multi-factor auth, but they're using a technology outside of Microsoft to implement it, which we're fine with. The recommendation from Microsoft is have some kind of multi-factor auth. We would love you to use Microsoft, but we just actually want you to use multi-factor auth. So if you're using Cisco, if you're using another implementation, you can now actually mark that recommendation as being met by a third party, and we'll give you the points for actually taking that action. We also give you the ability to ignore a certain control. So if you're reading the recommendation from Microsoft and you don't feel it applies to your business, we give you the option to ignore a recommendation. By ignoring the recommendation, what you do is you remove the points from the denominator that you could get for that score. So I'll give you an example of this. We have a recommendation that says you should have no more than 5 global administrators within your tenants. For large enterprises, that's pretty hard to meet. If you've got a large IT team, you're very likely to have more than 5 global administrators. So those organizations are never going to hit that security recommendation. So what we do is we give you the ability to, I hear what you're saying, Microsoft, I see the recommendation, but it doesn't apply to my particular business. I can't meet this. Therefore, you can then go and ignore that particular control. We've also expanded out the historical view in terms of letting you see what's changed on a day-to-day basis. One of the bits of feedback we had was that a score can move, you can have an upward trend or a downward trend, and it was pretty manual prior to try and find out what's actually influenced that score. When we do the demonstration, what I'm going to show you is we can select 2 individual days from our timeline now and see exactly what security configuration changed on those particular days, showing you an upward trend or a downward trend. So you can kind of really zero in and see, did somebody turn something off when it should have remained on, and kind of give you that nice audit trail of what's changing. We also implemented a search view. So as the controls grew, obviously finding them became harder. So we just implemented a really simple way that when you're looking at your action list, we can just type in the name of a control and it will start to pre-filter those controls in advance of time. And then finally, we're introducing industry views. So earlier this year, we introduced a view that let you compare your score to customers of a similar seat size. So if I was in a seat size of, say, 0 to 2,000, I could see my average score against every other office customer who was in that similar seat size to you. The frequent feedback was, we would love to see industry. I'm a pharmaceutical customer. I want to know how other pharmaceutical companies are trending their average with their score. So we're rolling out this week the ability to do exactly that. If you've gone and set your industry in the Security Compliance Center, we will now show you what your industry average secure score is, as long as your office plus your seat size average. Again, to kind of give you a better feel for how you're tracking within your environment. So what we're going to do now is we're going to dive into the experience and just kind of walk you through some of these changes so you can kind of see them for yourselves. So as you can see, we talked about the first thing you see when you visit the experience now, and one thing to note before I go full screen is we're now securescore.microsoft.com. So securescore.office.com still exists, will continue to exist forever, but we're rebranding across to securescore.microsoft.com. And as I mentioned, this is because we're starting to bring in additional cloud services such as Windows. So as you can see in this particular tenant here, I also have a Windows subscription where I have Windows ATP, and I've been taking the security recommendations from Windows. This score is now combined with my Office score to give me what my Microsoft score is now within my environment itself. As I mentioned, we're going to continually add to this over time, so we'll kind of see more and more pillars come into this environment. As I mentioned, as we go down, we have the score modeler. So this is where you define what you want your security posture to be within an organization. Every organization is different. You have the ability to choose a balanced security posture, an aggressive security posture, or you can go to a basic security posture. Depending on the type of posture that you select for your organization will determine the number of security recommendations that the tool gives you to make. So as you can see, by having a basic posture, it's kind of giving me 6 actions that it would recommend I take to meet that particular score. If I move up to balanced, I now go to 14 actions. If I go all the way to the right, I go up to 25 actions. The important thing to note with security is there is a fine line between productivity and security. We would very rarely recommend a customer racks this thing to the right, because you will take an impact to your productivity. Because at that point, we're introducing things like you should have MFA turned on for every single user within your organization. Yes, that is a recommendation, but it can be a disruptive one. There are support implications, there are help desk implementations, and so forth and so on. So we want to let you balance your security needs versus what your business posture actually is within the organization. So as I also mentioned, we've introduced over here these new average tracks. So originally we just had the Office 365 secure score, and we had the Office 365 average score. And there was a bit of concern that this number was a bit low. The reason for that is that is an aggregate number of over 6.5 million tenants. Given the sheer scale of that, it tends to kind of bring it down. So what we have done is introduce 2 additional things. Your seat size. So this is the average of your score against customers with a similar seat size, and then the industry type average. So this particular customer here is a finance customer. So I've gone into the Security Compliance Center and I have nominated myself as I am in the finance industry. So now I get the average scores for every other customer who's also indicated that they are a financial institution. Again, for the seat size, this particular tenant is between 6 and 100. So the average for that, again, is now displayed. So you can adjust these things to kind of give you that better view. One other thing I mentioned, as you can see, if I have an aggressive score here, I have 27 potential actions that I can be taking. And a lot of customers were asking for the ability to kind of zero in on a particular thing. So we just introduced a simple search box here where you can start to type in the text and it will then filter down that list so you can actually kind of get to the controls that you're interested in taking much quicker. Now, in terms of within the controls itself, let's have a quick look there and see at some of the things that have changed. So as I mentioned, we now have the ability to ignore and third-party particular controls. So for this particular recommendation, we're saying that we should enable MFA for all of our admins within the environment. Now, if I was using Microsoft's implementation of MFA, we have the telemetry for that and we can kind of give you the points really easily because we can see that you are using our technology to do it. Obviously, we don't have access to third-party telemetry, so you may have implemented this recommendation. Every admin in your environment may well be using MFA, but we didn't have a way to kind of give you credit for following that recommendation, which is what we introduced with the third-party button. So I can now nominate this particular control. I can enter some text just to explain and have like an audit trail of why I've done that. And if I then click save, I then automatically get the points for that recommendation. So I'm now covered if I am using another kind of third party in that environment. And as I mentioned again, we also have the ability to ignore. So if I have a certain particularly security recommendation that I'm never going to apply within my tenant because it just doesn't apply, I now have the ability to ignore that. The important thing to remember with the ignore control is that it will remove it from the total denominator of the maximum points that you could possibly get. But don't worry, when we go to the analyzer page, I'll show you if you have ignored third-party controls or opted for a third party, you can undo those actions. We give you a view of this is every control that you've said is being met by a third party. This is every control that I have chosen to ignore within my particular environment. So this is the main interface in terms of I want to take actions, I want to improve my security posture within the organization. Say now I want to kind of view my historical progress, I want to generate a roadmap, I kind of want to see how I'm tracking over time. How do we look to achieve that? So the way we achieve that is we have an option at the top here on a tab called the Score Analyzer. And if we pivot across to that, what this then shows you is your score over time. So this shows you how your individual score is tracking over a particular period of time. By default, we give you some views such as the last 7 days, the last 30 days, or the last 3 months. So again, it gives you a really easy way to see kind of how you're trending. One of the big kind of value behind Secure Score is that we want to kind of see you having gradual improvement over time of your average score. And that's really what we should be aiming for, to kind of take these wins as we go over time. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, one of the new things we've implemented is this ability here to compare your scores. So we give you the option to pick 2 particular dates within your tenancy. And what the tool will then show you is exactly what changed between those 2 dates, which is pretty important because in a large organization where you've got many administrators, things can get changed. A security recommendation could be applied by one administrator, and then potentially in a few weeks that could have been unapplied by somebody else. And if you're not actively looking at your audit logs and tracking this, you may have missed it. This is a really easy way to kind of see that trending on a per control basis. So we show you what control changed, whether it was a downward trend or whether it was an upward trend, and what the difference was between the 2 dates. So for this particular one here, you can see I was being given 20 points for MFA on April the 1st, and on April the 7th, that dropped down to 19. So something changed. I either added a new MFA into my environment, we didn't enable MFA for that account, or something else would have changed within the environment. Another thing that you can do within the score analyzer, just let me get back out. As I mentioned, we show you what your completed actions are, we show you what your incomplete actions are, what actions you've ignored, and what actions were met by a third party. So we let you pivot between those views. So in this particular view here, it's showing me this is everything that I've completed. So I've gone through that action list, I've started implementing the recommendations. This is showing me everything that has actually been enabled within this tenant. So I can go through here and I can see, okay, I enabled MFA for this particular environment, I've enabled my forwarding rules block, and I've gone through and done these various actions. It then lets me pivot on things that I haven't done. So these are all of my incomplete actions that I've yet to take within the environment. As I mentioned, I can then look at, these are things that I've ignored within my environment, so I'm not going to take the best practice. So as I mentioned, this particular one here, designate less than 5 global admins. For this particular tenant, that isn't something that's applicable, so I've taken the decision to ignore that best practice and remove that potential score from my environment. And then I have the option to pivot on my, what has been met by a third party. So I'm using another technology. I'm using something like a third party kind of spam filtering house instead of EOP or ATP, or I'm using something else to kind of manage those things. So we then let you, these are all the ones that I've met by a third party to, again, to help you kind of drive those scores up within the environment itself. The other thing that's important that it's worth kind of noting is the ability to kind of export data from the experience itself as well. So we have a lot of requests for how can I do this, and we give you the option to export your action list. So this is really good for discussions with senior leadership team. As IT pros, you've sat down and decided what your security posture is going to be. You can then export that action list and actually use it to drive a roadmap. So it will kind of give you up to 59 security recommendations that Microsoft is giving you for your tenant. So it's then really easy to have those discussions with your senior leadership team to drive those improvements. Certainly where some of the actions will require, if a customer has governance or any kind of CAB process that they need to run through, that becomes pretty invaluable. We also let you export that as a CSV. What we also do is let you export the entire control list. Now the control list is basically, it's an Excel spreadsheet, but it shows you every control that is within Secure Score, what the weighting of that control is, and how many points that control gives you. And so the weighting is important because we look at things like the impact, the user cost, and some controls are worth substantially more points than other controls, and it's the weighting that derives that action. So we kind of give you the ability to kind of look through and export that out. So that's kind of like a real super quick overview of all the new features. The kind of key takeaways are the integration of Windows now into here, and the repositioning to Microsoft Secure Score from Office Secure Score, plus the ability to have things like industry averages and seat size averages as we go forward. I've got about 1 minute left. Has anybody got any questions that they'd like to send my way? It's always a good sign if there's no questions. It means I've talked too much. There we go. All right then, folks. Well, thank you ever so much for your time. That was a quick overview of Secure Score. Please feel free to try it. It's completely free. It's not tiered to any particular SKU, so you can just go to securescore.microsoft.com today and start to experience this. Okay, thank you.